We're back, everyone, and today we're covering how to run a Session 0. A Session 0, as it has been labelled, is used by Dungeon Masters and players to discuss a campaign that is about to begin. As well as in my campaigns particularly, it's a session where they all get to make their characters. Session 0s are important, and I encourage everyone to do them. There are many reasons why, but the main reason is so you and your players understand one another. Whether this is about the tone of the setting, the homebrew rules that you're planning to implement, or the types of potentially triggering content that may be included at the table. Session 0 is the opportunity to speak openly about the game and gain a consensus from each other. You can spend as little or as much time talking about things as you want, but for me, I try to get through it within an hour or so. Let's start with setting the tone. At the start of Session 0, it's worth telling your party about your campaign. My recommendation would be 3 to 4 paragraphs underlying the area, the time period, and the main hook for the story. Some Dungeon Masters like to go on and on about their campaign settings, and if you're one of those people, prepare what you're going to say. It's a very good idea to state what type of fantasy you're running, whether that's high fantasy, low fantasy, steampunk, sci-fi, etc. You should explain the types of people in the setting who are adventurers, and what some of the local monsters' enemies are. I'll put on the screen the campaign premise for my current campaign, just so you guys can get an idea of what I would say to my party or to players, prospective players, about my game. If you have any idea about the history of your campaign, including a paragraph or some key historical points like a king's assassination or the eruption of a nearby volcano, is a good way to get the party thinking about your campaign and the kinds of people who would be in it. When I create campaigns, I actually roll a few times on the world-shaking events table from the Dungeon Master's Guide, which includes 10 different events that can develop your campaign. I actually rolled 3 times for the campaign that I'm running at the moment, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to share with you guys which ones I've used. Okay, I'll share one of them. Extinction or depletion. Giant spiders are super rare in my campaigns, and their silk is worth a bucket load of money. This is because the silk trade has been hampered, mainly because the main exporter of silk is in a long-term civil war with itself. This has raised the prices of silk drastically, meaning you're much more likely to have a hemp rope strapped to your back than a silk one. But anyway, for my last campaign, which involved an immortal elven prince who was conquering a human kingdom, I rolled 1, 4, and 5, which is rise of a leader or an era, assault or invasion, and lastly, rebellion, revolution, or overthrow. Usually, I roll on these tables, and that's enough for me to get the creative juices flowing. The next thing is table expectations, and this is a part of the session where we discuss both the player and the Dungeon Master expectations. A lot of emphasis is put on this one from major guides talking about running Session 0s, but most guides don't explain what to do when talking about player expectations and Dungeon Master expectations. My solution would be to consider and to ask the following questions. Is combat between players allowed? Is the general tone comedic or dramatic? Do players want a roleplay heavy game? Or a combat game, or a mixture? Are the party interested in wargaming, like leading troops, having big battles, etc.? This is also a good opportunity to set your ground rules, and I encourage every Dungeon Master to have a list, whether it's written down or imprinted into your players' heads. There should be a creed that every Dungeon Master and every table lives by. For me, it's don't be late to sessions without notifying me, be respectful of each other's time, be considerate of other players, treat everybody equally, don't start arguments or rule debates during sessions. Rules can be discussed after the session if things need to be changed. And in combat, act and roll your dice quickly as to not waste other people's time. It's 5 rules that I strongly consider. I may have a couple more, but those ones don't really come to mind very quickly for me. I think these rules especially are just common courtesy, right? But you might not be too surprised to know that there are quite a lot of people out there who don't really have common courtesy. If you explain your views during Session 0 and later have to kick somebody out for being late repeatedly or rude towards other players, at least you can refer to your Session 0 explaining that the player in question was aware of the rules and decided to break them. honestly, you don't need to have these rules in place to kick someone out for making the game less enjoyable. But having the moral high ground is always nice in situations like this. The next thing is content check. And this is a very important part of Session 0. It's all about outlining anything players would not want to see in the campaign. This could be things like phobias, discrimination, sexual content, slavery, and all sorts of other things. Some of you might be surprised to hear that sexual content is sometimes on the table for Dungeon Masters. There is an old school book called The Book of Erotic Fantasy made by Gwendolyn Kestrel, which some Dungeon Masters, still use. For me, I think sexual content is the only thing I don't really include in my games. I do the fade to black if my players go to brothels, seek out sexual partners, etc. My players, however, are comfortable exploring pretty much everything else. Next thing is house rules, which is also very important. Make sure you go through your house rules with your players and let them know what you do to make your games better. Having this all written out is very important, so players can read it at their leisure whilst you continue with the session at hand. Here's a simple list of things to consider. Do players gain experience or level up by milestones? Are there any class race restrictions? Any alignment restrictions? Any book restrictions? Are there custom encumbrance rules? Are there tables for critical hits or failures? Do you have your own initiative system? How much starting gold do the players get? Are players able to resurrect one another? And any other house rules or systems that you might be using. If you're like me, this might take a little while. If you follow this Session 0, you should be finished in an hour or so. After we finish this, we do character creation. I always have my players make their characters during Session 0, all together at the table. It's what makes my players excited to attend Session 0. Sure, we're going to go through some rules and regulations for the game, but we're going to make characters, so it's all worth it in the end. I have my players build their characters together, and I encourage them to discuss their ideas and mesh them together. For the start of my current campaign, I actually had 4 or 5 party themes for my players to choose from. They could play criminals, trying to work their way up the ladder of chaos. They could be monster hunters, looking for the next big kill. They could be explorers, sailing to faraway lands, looking for riches to plunder. Or they could play as religious zealots, fighting against cultists, paganism, and undeath. Both of my groups decided to choose the last option, meaning I'm running a serious Crusader campaign, which most of the party are worshipping a specific god. Some players do just want to do their own thing, and want to play like a group of ragtag adventurers who just want to do some quests. And unless you're really planning to do something like a seafaring campaign, I mean, that's fine, right? Having there be a dialogue for group synergy is very good. And I feel like most Dungeon Masters do just have the party be like a ragtag group of adventurers. And, whilst that's cool and all, it is pretty much what everybody else does. Having a theme to your campaign can really make the campaign more interesting and memorable. Once that's decided, we usually run through character creation system that I have at my tables. It's not a big deal if you just want to let your players freeform it, but what I'd recommend is having everybody do things at the same time, like choosing their races together, their classes together, so players can consider what each other are doing. I've had a party made up of all dwarves because a couple of players wanted to play dwarves and everybody else decided to join them. I ended up running an Erebor Hobbit-styled story for them, which was super cool. There are quite a few players out there who are happy just to fill in the gaps in a group, playing the healer or the tank or the rogue to fit a decent party composition. It's important, however, to understand that it's okay to have multiple of the same class. And to be fair, I've had groups where it's been all fighters or rogues, and whilst it is dangerous and a lot more difficult, it could end up being a really cool campaign. I'm planning to do a new video on my character creation system for Dungeons & Dragons, which I'll probably do in a couple of weeks. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on Session 0. I'll see you guys next time on Loki's Lair. Peace.